Israel has been hosting visitors since the days of Abraham. 4,000 years later, they're still coming.
Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Vegas Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Vegas Oh, Achim, Huru Achim, Velev Sameach, Huru Achim, Velev Sameach, Huru Achim, Velev Sameach, Huru Achim, Velev Sameach, Huru Achim, Huru Achim.
Most often, the first glimpse new visitors have of Israel is from their plane as it comes in low over the Mediterranean coast and slowly circles Tel Aviv before landing at Ben Gurion Airport. Surprisingly, even among those who have never set foot in this land before, there may be a stirring sense of a homecoming. And there are also two more surprises in store. First, whatever the purpose of the visit, it is likely at some point to feel like a pilgrimage, a journey of the heart at the very least. Secondly, be aware that time here refuses to be confined to its normal dimensions. In Israel, past, present, and future are condensed into something new. Something timeless, eternal. Places here are so old, they have many names. And so it's fair to wonder just how old is Old Jaffa, or Joppa, or Yaffo, as it was once called. If you can believe it, this town was said to be founded by Noah's son Japhet. And so, to walk its streets is to reach back in the briefest of moments to biblical time. Modern Tel Aviv, thriving and vibrant as it is today, really started very small with a few houses built on sand dunes as tiny Jaffa expanded northward. Poorest farmland without a fine harbor of its own, Tel Aviv quickly became a center for international business. As a commercial center, diamonds, high-tech, pharmaceuticals, the city succeeded and continues to succeed beyond its wildest dreams. If Old Jerusalem is Israel's wise and solemn biblical city, Tel Aviv is its pulsing contemporary opposite. Fast and brash, forward-looking and modestly materialistic. Old Jerusalem may belong to the world. Tel Aviv is a more secular and modern Israeli creation. Here on the beach promenade, you see the energy and joy of life in Tel Aviv. A joy expressed with the full understanding that Israel can be a dangerous place in the world. And this joy may even be more deeply felt because of it. There is an optimism in this place, a youthful energy so palpable, so forceful, it can barely be repressed. Which is why the city's expansion even further up the Mediterranean coast has been inevitable. The Mediterranean coast north of Tel Aviv has attracted foreign conquest of one sort or another ever since the pharaohs ruled in Egypt. Most Old Testament miracles occurred on jagged mountain peaks high over the desert. But here on lush Mount Carmel, the Hebrew prophet Elijah challenged the false prophets of the Canaanites. And the Bible tells us that the invisible Hebrew God was more powerful than the golden idols of Baal. In this country, even in a secular city like Haifa, where the buses run on Saturday, the spirit of religion is still a presence. Here, just as the New Testament is a religious history built upon the Old, this Christian Carmelite monastery in Haifa stands above the Hebrew prophet Elijah's cave. One tradition built solidly upon another. Here, too, is the world headquarters of the very tolerant, all-embracing Baha'i religion. This garden shrine is the ideal place for quiet prayer and meditation. And no services or ceremonies are ever held. The tranquility up here is an escape from the activity of the port city below.
Chiribim, chiribom, chiribim bom 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 bom, chiribim, chiribom, chiribim.
The business of Haifa is really the business of its bustling port.
Chiribim bom bom, chiribim bom, chiribim bom 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 bom. Lass mir singen kinderliche Sämerl zusammen, an Negengel a freilichen mit.
And what a warm and welcoming place this port city is.
Lockschensupp mit Kasche in mit Knädel, Kinder jontiv pieren, wenn wir spielen sich in der.
Because this land is so old and so much the focus of world attention, it's easy to forget how tiny this country actually is.
Chiribim bom 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 bom, chiribiribiribiribiribiribiribiribiribiribiribim bom bom.
Hard as it may be to believe, Israel is just a little smaller than Vermont. This area between the Chula Valley and the Golan Heights attracts more tourists than any other natural site in Israel. Visitors never imagined before coming here that they would ever come upon a place quite like this. It wasn't, but could well have been the setting for the biblical Garden of Eden. "60 years ago, you would have seen malarial swampland here overrun with snakes. The transformation to some of the richest farmland in Israel is not a miracle in the conventional biblical sense, but the result of collective physical effort, a more human miracle. It took the early pioneers and kibbutzim many long years to drain this valley and begin to produce this sort of abundance. Places like the Chula are the pride of modern Israel. Here, announcing its 60th birthday. Known to Israelis as the Kinneret, to many others as the Sea of Galilee, this area has special significance for Christians. It is where Jesus began to preach and gather followers and his disciples. These are the waters he was said to have walked upon. In recent years, Israeli engineers have devised an ingenious irrigation system that sends water from the abundant Galilee to farmland in very distant parts of the country. This remarkable water transport, as well as the enormous physical labor of the men and women who tend the land, have produced another modern miracle. They made the distant desert bloom. Yes, large parts of the desert have been made fertile. But a vast desert can be a very formidable adversary. Here in Qumran, on the Dead Sea, are the remains of a village once populated by the Essenes, a Hebrew sect devoted to the purest forms of Judaism. Little was known about them until the discovery in 1947 of their scrolls, well preserved in earthenware jars, copies of the Old Testament and other documents in the original Hebrew and Aramaic. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls by a young Bedouin boy in Qumran more than 2,000 years later seems like the perfect dramatic touch in a modern biblical tale. That a country so old can also be so new makes Israel utterly unique in the world. What people have built here in so short a time is, of course, a testament to their leaders, Ben-Gurion, Meir, Dayan, Rabin, but it is the people, their collective effort, their faith, and their optimism that has built this land. This is the source of their national pride, the foundation for their belief in their future. Nevertheless, everyone here lives with a realistic sense of just how precarious that future may be. It is very little solace to know that such has been the situation in this land almost forever. Here, hope must be renewed every day. And so, Israelis take their modest pleasures wherever they can find them. A Bedouin seeks the next oasis. A Talmudic scholar finds the solitude of a quiet sanctuary. Once again today, a tailor works at his craft in the marketplace. We touch our glasses and hope for the very best for our children. Nowhere else do such small human pleasures mean quite so much. This Israeli port city is so old, we don't know how many names it may have had. We only know the last two, Acre or Akko. We do know that it has sheltered and supported 5 continuous millennia of human civilization. To walk its streets is to discover another dimension of time. Here, Canaanites and Phoenicians built a once thriving Mediterranean port. Here, Alexander the Great created a majestic Greek colony. And Julius Caesar had his workers lay the first stones of a Roman road in Judea. No, time in Akko is not on your wristwatch. Christian crusaders, Richard the Lionhearted among them, made this their main port in their various attempts to retake Jerusalem and the Holy Land from Muslim armies. The depth of their devotion to their cause can be seen in the enormous crusader city they constructed here over the centuries. Ottoman Turks ruled Akko for many hundreds of years, until the end of World War II. But when the British took control of the city, they made the old Crusader fortress a prison for hundreds of Jewish freedom fighters, who staged a daring jailbreak on the brink of Israeli independence. It It was an inspiring symbolic act of national liberation. Perhaps because of its great age and continuous mingling of cultures, Akko is one of the most atmospheric and intriguing places in Israel. It is as though time and the modern world have almost completely passed it by. To learn the lessons of a land in which creation and destruction and new creation follow upon one another endlessly, until time itself becomes almost incomprehensible, consider carefully Beit She'an. The city was inhabited successively by Canaanites, Egyptians, Philistines, Hebrews, and others before succumbing to the irresistible power of Alexander the Great, who created a thriving Hellenistic city of 40,000 inhabitants. It remained a remarkable place under the conquering Romans as well, becoming one of their 10 ideal city-states in the Holy Land. Even today, it is not difficult to imagine the splendor of daily life in such a place during its golden age. Emperor Hadrian very much desired to eliminate Judaism from the Holy Land. He believed that by removing rabbis, forbidding ritual practices, erasing biblical tales, and guiding principles, Judaism would soon wither and die. In addition, of course, Jews were driven out of their land in vast numbers. This is the time of the Great Dispersal. A powerful earthquake in 749 destroyed this Roman showplace, a city caught in the moment of destruction, like Pompeii itself. All the while, the years of the Jewish calendar roll on into multiple millennia. An abiding faith and a practice of Hebrew rituals stood the test of time far better than Hadrian and the Roman Temple of Jupiter. One source of that undying faith is to be found in the country's vast expanse of desert. No, not a desert like the Great Sahara with its endless horizon of sky and dunes, but a harsh desert of inhospitable craters and crags and rugged mountain peaks. Just what is there about this desert land, about the Judean, the Negev, the Sinai, that has infused Jewish biblical history with such spiritual power? There is an intensity in this place from which religious fervor springs like an oasis in the wilderness. A desert mountaintop in the Holy Land is where nomadic Abraham struck an eternal covenant with a powerful new God and began to reshape the religious history of the world. Abraham was the father of Isaac, but he was father to Ishmael as well, and as such, the patriarch is also worshipped as a prophet of Islam, an ancient ancestor of Muhammad. In one sense, the conflict in the Holy Land is a rivalry of brothers. In this desert shrine, Muslims worship as prophets many of the same patriarchs as the Hebrews. In fact, many Muslims believe the sacred bones of Moses are enshrined here in Nebi Musa. And since New Testament Christianity grew out of the Old, this world religion too has its roots in Abraham's faith. A monastery in this cliffside brings worship very close to its desert source. Nature can do wonderful and unexpected things in the desert. As here at David's Spring in Ein Gedi, where the embattled future king once sought a refuge. Here there is a surprisingly lush beauty described in this sensual passage from the biblical Song of Songs.
My love will lie between my breasts like a cluster of blossoms picked from the spring of Ein Gedi.
In stark contrast, Sodom and Gomorrah, which once stood as great cities nearby, were utterly destroyed by God's wrath. In Sodom, though, God agreed to save Abraham's nephew Lot and his family. Lot's wife was lost when she disobeyed God and looked back at the burning city. There's a pillar of salt here with her name on it. You can actually smell the salt in the air as you approach the aptly named Dead Sea, one of the most saline bodies of water in the world. In past centuries, it was known as the Salt Sea. Although this area may look a bit like the end of the world, it is really only the bottom of the world, the lowest point on the face of the earth, 1,350 feet below sea level. If abstract art happens to be your passion, you've come to the right place. The Dead Sea is vibrantly alive with dramatic color.
Aleichem, Heveinu Shalom Aleichem, Heveinu Shalom.
There are a surprising number of resorts and spas on these shores. The waters and the mineral-laden mud are believed by many to have great therapeutic value.
Aleichem, Heveinu Shalom Aleichem, Heveinu Shalom Aleichem, Heveinu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Heveinu Shalom Aleichem, Heveinu Shalom Aleichem, Heveinu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem.
But it's the resorts and beaches on the western or Mediterranean coast, the Israeli Riviera, that draw most of the country's pleasure seekers. When we see an aqueduct, and such a beautiful one in the evening light, naturally we think, Romans have been here, and they have. It would be reasonable to assume that a city named after Caesar Augustus was an imperial Roman creation. Reasonable, but not quite correct. It was for the most part constructed by King Herod, the Jewish ruler the Romans chose to oversee their colony here. Herod built this city to honor his Roman masters, but since his true passion in life was building palaces and temples and fortresses in the imperial Roman style, Herod really built Caesarea for his own pleasure. Mighty Herod, the great builder, constructed masterworks throughout the land, often in the most unlikely places. King Herod would have liked the world to remember him eternally for the magnificent, inaccessible palace he built here, high above the Dead Sea. But regrettably, Masada is remembered for a very different reason. After Herod died, this fortress came back into Roman hands, but it was in turn taken by a daring army of Israelite rebels known as Zealots. After the Romans crushed the colonial insurrection in Jerusalem, Masada remained the last Zealot stronghold. In 72 AD, the 10th Roman legion, 10,000 strong, surrounded the fortress and attacked the fewer than 1,000 Jewish men, women, and children in a siege that lasted the better part of a year. Finally, facing inevitable defeat, the Zealots burned all their defenses. The Israelites chose not to surrender and become Roman slaves. Each of the men killed his own family. After lots were drawn, the survivors were slain by the last man standing, who in turn killed himself. Upon entering Masada, Roman legionnaires, themselves devoted to a very strict code of duty and honor, stood stock still. They had never seen anything like this before. Masada has not and will never recede in Jewish memory. These days, in fact, many young men and women, when they join the Israeli armed forces, as almost all citizens are required to do, swear to this oath: Masada will not fall again. Many people here like to call inaccessible Eilat Israel's first city because it dates from the time Moses led the Israelites out of bondage in Egypt. Back then, this desolate spot on the Red Sea was definitely not the land of milk and honey. So Moses moved on. Vacationers still say they're off to Sof HaOlam, the end of the world. But if this is the end of the world, why worry? Lovers of any form of water sports find the Sof HaOlam a great place to be. Swimmers can snorkel out to the underwater observatory. Or they can ride along with the dolphins a bit further out into the Red Sea. At any time of the day, Eilat is a jewel. At night, it becomes a tiara. Patriarch Abraham might not have approved of the luxurious life in a city like this, but so far at least, it has been spared the fire and brimstone of Sodom and Gomorrah. Because the salt marshes just north of Eilat are feeding grounds for birds migrating to and from Africa, in season the skies are filled with some of the most beautiful species imaginable. The phenomenon, draws bird watchers from all over the world. No question, the Negev is harsh. But the same people who have made the desert blossom have also managed to make traversing it almost pleasant. The lesson of the Romans has not been wasted, and so modern Israelis have made sure all their roads lead eventually to a powerful source. This golden city on the hill, this incarnation of ancient Israel, the city where Abraham was summoned to sacrifice his son Isaac, the city of King David's glory and Solomon's great temple. In Islam, it is Al-Qud, simply the holy, from where Muhammad ascended to heaven on his steed. To Christians, this is where Jesus spent his final days, the site of crucifixion and resurrection. Can there be a more sanctified place on this earth? It was King David, according to the Old Testament, who captured this city and renamed it Jerusalem, the dwelling of peace, and proclaimed it the Hebrew capital. When David brought to Jerusalem the Ark of the Covenant, the everlasting bond between God and the Israelites, the old walled city's sacred status for Jews was established forever. The old city of Jerusalem isn't really very old, as old cities go in Israel, a mere 3,000 years. And it never really was very large. The enclosing walls, built in the 16th century, are only 2.5 miles around. But it has always had a spiritual power far greater than its size. And the old city's international attraction is, of course, remarkably diverse. For many, St. Peter's in Rome is the central symbol of world Catholicism, and it is certainly a glorious cathedral. But it is very hard to imagine a more sacred place for Christians than this. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is believed to be constructed on the hill in Calvary, where Jesus Christ was crucified. A high altar in the church marks the very spot. Also, within the confines of this church, the body of Jesus was laid to rest. The Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount, Haram es-Sharif, the noble sanctuary to Muslims, is a sacred shrine and mosque that marks the exact spot where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. The specific site is also sacred to Hebrews as the place where God spoke to Abraham and where the Ark of the Covenant was sheltered before the destruction of the great temple. It was David's son, Solomon, who built the first temple on this site. In scale and splendor, the temple was nothing short of wondrous. After Solomon's death, the temple was destroyed for the first time by the Babylonians, and the Israelites were forced into captivity. They returned eventually to their holy city and began rebuilding their faith and their temple. Ironically, it was the master builder and oppressor of his fellow Jews, King Herod, who finished rebuilding the magnificent Second Temple. Before the Jewish rebels were defeated at Masada, the Roman army in Jerusalem destroyed the Second Temple, only a small portion of which remains. The Western, or Wailing Wall, one of the most sacred sites for Jews, a place of continual prayer and worship. In the 19th century, the old city of Jerusalem nearly burst its boundaries, and a second, new and dynamic Jerusalem was born. Since independence in 1948, the country's capital city has come to resemble a modern metropolis. Here in the aptly named Shrine of the Book, the Dead Sea Scrolls are on display. The Mount of Olives holds a special place in Judeo-Christian religious history, and it happens to offer a splendid view of Old Jerusalem at sunrise as well. But it is also for many of the Jewish faith the most desirable cemetery in Jerusalem, because it is believed by some that those buried here have the best chance to be resurrected on the day of judgment. The cemetery at nearby Mount Zion may not be quite as desirable a resting place, but it too houses some very noble souls. Happily, Oskar Schindler, who was not Jewish, had his desire to be buried in Israel fulfilled. One may choose to enter Yad Vashem by walking along the avenue of the righteous of all nations, which is lined with plaques bearing the names of non-Jews who risk their lives to save others. A wise old Jewish man once wrote that the problem with the number 6 million is that it contains too many zeros. A horror of this magnitude can only truly register when it is multiplied by 1, and 1, and 1, and 1, 6 million times.
For dir meine Gott, Keli, Keli, lamo azabtoni, Keli.
Jewish music, like so much Jewish humor, is often tinged with sadness because of the long and often painful history that shaped it.
Zur Nacht, nach ich tracht, von dir, meine Gott.
But on the streets of Haifa, Tel Aviv, and modern Jerusalem, almost any night of the week, the music and the life is anything but sad. On these streets, the most important thing is that there is humor, and there is music, and that as long as we and our children and our grandchildren can still hear it in our hearts, in our souls, we absolutely must, and we will, keep dancing.
If you would like a copy of this program, call 1-800-847-7793.